Okay, it's gonna go live.
Exciting. Hello, Jennifer. Oh, you're muted.
I'm not saying anything that interesting. I just said I ran up the stairs. The dog had to go out and then I had to let her in and stress.
Yes.
I feel you.
Yeah.
How are you guys? Yeah, you have a lot of animals in the background.
Yeah, yep. I only have 2 cats and a dog, but still.
Oh, okay.
I rushed home, just made it in the nick of time.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. We have 2 dogs as well. So there were a couple times when I was in the middle of teaching a lesson. Whenever the male person walks by, the one dog barks all the way around the cul-de-sac until they go past our house. And it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, that drives me. Oh, that's
So,
funny.
yeah.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Rob.
Hello, how you guys?
Good. How are you?
Good. Always running behind here. A million things to do, but sorry.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So
Is your school out yet?
Say it again.
Is your school out yet?
Yeah, our school is out. That just means it's open season to do everything I didn't get done.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good.
Save a lot of things for this time of year.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep.
Do we have a particular thing I should have open?
Well, I sent the agenda out, I think, or like maybe last Friday or something,
Yeah.
but I can just share it as well.
Okay,
So
I
if you
don't
just
need
want me to
anything.
share my screen, that's fine.
Okay.
And then I shared all those documents that I shared with the board because they're like the same documents, but I reshared them, I think, with you guys just so that
Yep.
you would have them. So you had them like in a place or whatever, as
Right.
opposed to going through the board file or the board folder. So, all right, well, I'll share my screen so then we can at least look at the agenda. All right, so I think you can see the agenda. Let me make it a little bit larger. I always know for me, I always need to do that. When other people are sharing, I'm like, I can't even see that myself. What are you talking about? That doesn't help me at all. So, all right. So Jeff couldn't come tonight, but I thought we should all introduce ourselves just because we do have a new person here. Although I think we all know each other, but of course I'm Lisa. I know all of you. So I'm a teacher and the chair of the search committee. Gina, do you want to go next?
Yes, I'm Gina. I'm a biology teacher and I'm currently on the board. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I'm on the search committee.
All right, Jennifer.
Yeah, I'm Jennifer. I'm also on the board, the parent member representative, I guess. And I have 2 kids at MSA.
And Rob Krieger, I parent member, board.
Mary.
Mary Yap. I am a parent of a graduate as well as a 7th grader and chair of the interim hiring task force.
So thanks so much for being here and for volunteering all of your time. So we have a few things to get through today, and I think we'll have to plan another meeting as well. So Jeff could not be here today, but I have his minutes and stuff, so I'll just kind of talk a little bit about them with you. So if we want to kind of start with Mary, if you want to do like a little update from the interim hiring task force.
So we spent our time last week delegating responsibilities and duties among the task force as far as who was setting up Zooms, who was going to be calling candidates. We brainstormed different ways that we can get the word out about the vacancies, and it's been posted on LinkedIn, and I know I've gotten at least 2 contacts based on that and had conversations with them. And then we spent quite a bit of time going over categories that we want to make sure are categories of questions and coming up with questions to be asked during the interviews. So we had a long list, an extensive list of questions, and we are putting those into groups of fitting them into which category they fall into. And there are about 6 to 8 different categories.
All right, thanks so much. And just so the rest of you know, like the minutes and the agendas on like the board spot on the website, there's also folders for each of these task forces, and there's a spot for minutes and agendas. So those are going there, like, you know, like on each task force, the chair is responsible for putting the agenda together, along with if they want help from me or suggestions or whatever. And then they're supposed to send that to Carrie, and Carrie will post that online. And then there's a note taker for each of the task forces. And those note takers then take the notes and then send it to Carrie and post those online. So even though it's not like a committee that has the same requirements as the board, at least the agendas and those minutes are getting posted there. Do you want me to send those to you as well? Or can you just look at the board folders? And if you want to see more in depth than what Mary talked about today, you could go there and look at it yourself. Or do you want copies of those sent to you?
I'm fine, just looking at when we need them.
Okay.
Can you
Right,
tell me
everybody?
where? Can you tell me where to find them?
Oh, sure.
On the
I can even just show you
Okay.
where they are.
That's good.
So,
That'd be nice.
yep, no worries. So then all of the stuff for the board is, you know, down here in the board of directors page. So then
Okay.
there's if you go to the web page,
Yeah.
then on this side, there is a tab for the director search
Okay.
committee.
Okay.
And then like we have the search committee stuff that we've already done, the agendas and the notes in there. Then you can see for the 2 other task forces, there's one for agendas, one for notes, one for agendas and notes.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
now, yeah, no worries. Carrie, I think, was out yesterday and today. So it might be that like it's not currently up to date. Like obviously like the transition committee or task force just met. I'm not sure if their agenda got put in there before their meeting or not, but obviously that will get done when Carrie gets back. So just so that you know, the idea is kind of 24 hours ahead of time, try to get it in there so that, you know, the rest of the community can see what the plan is, you know, at least for that meeting. But those meetings are not, you know, broadcast or anything like that. So any questions about any of that? All right. And so then for the update from the interim transition task force, like I said, Jeff couldn't be here, but basically they have been putting together this extensive list of all the different things that like all the documents that have to be retained, you know, and Joelle's been working on that kind of for the last couple of weeks anyways, and she's on that task force. So they're looking at that. They're trying to also they're going to need information from us, just like the hiring task force is going to need information from us about, you know, what are the broad goals that we want this person to work on. The interim transition task force is also putting together like a schedule, like what will it look like when that new interim is hired? When will they meet with Joelle? When will they meet with the assistant directors? When will they get their computer? You know, trying to figure out all of those kind of human resources things that have to be done because we don't have a human resource person to do those things. So we have to figure out, you know, how all of that will happen as well. So not only document retention, not only kind of like pointing them in the right direction as far as, you know, whatever the bigger goals are, what are the smaller details of the school, but also then that onboarding, you know, meeting different people, figuring out all of those other things that the interim will need in that, you know, first week or two, and then kind of over the first kind of couple of months. Because obviously they're going to have to come on and start fall planning right away. I mean, that's what needs to be done right away. You know, so they're going to have to figure some of those things out. So that committee has really been working on those things. And so it's kind of a unique thing because there's all these little small tasks that they have to do, you know, the day-to-day meetings of what the onboarding will look like, and then all these documents, but they also have to fit it into the bigger picture that we still have to give to them about what are these kind of larger areas that we want the interim to work on. So they're kind of looking at that, looking for us to provide that information. And I would think that the hiring task force is also looking for us to kind of provide that information as well. so that they can, Mary was saying, we started looking at interview questions and stuff, but I think we had probably, I don't know, 50 of them or something. So we obviously have to narrow those things down. So we have to have some better direction from the search committee. All right, so then the next thing on the agenda is just the number of applicants and any change in the course needed. So I did put up some more ads actually today. So just I've almost spent all the money, not quite, but I almost spent all of it. And so we do have, I think, like 4 or 5 applicants right now. So I feel like, there's going to be some good ones that we'll be able to present to the board. I did, though, based on the board meeting last night, since we kind of came up with that idea that we're probably going to meet on June 10th, that Thursday, I did put the hiring, or I did make it so that the application would be open for 1 more week. So originally I had it closed at the end of this week on the 21st, but I felt like, well, if we look at that day of June 10th, the schedule could work out that we could have 1 more week of people to be able to turn in applications to us. So I don't know if there's any issues or questions that you have regarding that part right now.
I think that's wonderful that we got more in.
How does that get updated on some of the places? So for instance, the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools still has May 21st as the deadline. Can we update that?
Right. So I'm going to have to go to each one of those and get those fixed. And so it might not be the most timely thing, but the other thing that I will be doing is that anybody who's turned in their applications, I will be letting them know that, hey, you've turned it in already. We have it. We, added a week to it. So, I mean, it might not reach as many people as we want with the new date, but at least it's better than not doing anything, was the way that I looked at it. So any place that we could get it longer, we could make those changes. That gave us more visibility and more people to hopefully come in and see our school and then apply.
Okay.
So yeah, some of them, it will take a couple of days and stuff like that too. So yeah.
Very good.
Right. The other part of that to me is just, I want to make sure that we are clear on what you want from me. And if you don't get it, what you want to have happen, which I know sounds like sort of like a weird thing. My goal is to bring 3 candidates to the board. Okay, that's my goal. Because I think if you only bring 2, if one doesn't show up on that day, then I'm only bringing you 1 candidate. And your hands are tied because you only have that 1 candidate. What else can you do, right? I mean, what else do you want to do? Or what can you do? I don't think there's a lot you can do. So what I want to know is, my plan is to bring 3 candidates from the hiring committee to the board. What happens if both of the people, I mean, we can obviously go out, go out like, well, if I bring 5 and 4 don't come, I'm not trying to do that, but I'm just trying to say is, if on the day of the interview, for some weird reason, there is only 1 candidate, do you want to go forward with having that interview with that 1 person? Or should we dial it back and try to get some of the other candidates that we didn't put into the final 3? And we don't necessarily have to make this decision now, but I want to know before the time so that if any decision has to be made, I can make the decision, or we can get together and have a meeting and make that decision. Because at the last hiring, they had 2 on the day and then 1 backed out, but they didn't have a plan as to what to do. So then they just had the 1 interview. So I want you to kind of think about that. And if you have suggestions about what we can do in that case, let me know as well.
So is the goal then for the interim hiring task force? So Mary, you're gonna do initial interviews. Okay. And then narrow it down to 3.
Correct.
But if you like 4, I mean, if there's more that you like, I think that would be good if you brought them forward. I don't see any problem with that.
We could do that. I see no issue to you, Lisa?
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me. It's just if we bring four forward, then at that final search committee or at that final board meeting, you're looking at 4 hours of interviews and then your board meeting, your closed meeting after that to discuss them.
Right.
So like 3 to me is just a better number because it's more manageable, because then you're having 3 hours of interviews and then probably an hour of a conversation of who you want to hire after that. So, I mean, you know, if I brought 3 forward, but there was one that was sort of okay, I could of course call that one back in.
Yeah.
But I just want to know if I have no options, but have one person left, we need to figure out what to do in that case.
I'd rather have 2 strong candidates than 4 wishy-washy. I would, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
you know, I'd rather do 2 interviews instead of bring 2 extras just to meet a number, but we can't tell the difference between 3 and 4.
Yep.
Well, let's just not bring in 3 and 4 and interview 1 and 2. And so, I mean, that's my opinion on it. Let's not bring in 3 just to bring in 3 if 1 and 2 are head and shoulders above each other. I really doubt that we're going to have 4 outstanding candidates. But if that's the case, I agree, Jennifer, we should interview all 4 of them. If the hiring committee says, wow, we have these 4 to choose from, and there's no way we can delineate them. But I mean, so there's so many things that could happen. I agree, we shouldn't pigeonhole ourselves. And if we only have 1 outstanding candidate, we interview that person. If we all like them, we hire them. But
I
if
agree.
there's some push and saying, well, I don't know, we definitely shouldn't just hire them. We should see if we can shake the bushes some more.
Yeah.
I agree.
I
Let's
agree.
play it by ear. Let's see how it goes.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure that I know what you want me to do. So, okay, that's totally fine. All right. And I don't have any other issues with number 4. Did you guys have any other questions about the numbers of the applicants or anything? You good? All right. The next thing then is the job description for the interim. And so, of course, since the board didn't approve it till last night, I'm not sure if you had a chance to look over it. And if we have, like, if it makes sense right now for us to kind of go through it and see if there are elements that we think could be taken out or elements that could go to the assistant directors or anything like that. Or, I mean, I don't know if you've had time to look at it, first of all. That's the first part of it. And then those second questions, we have to kind of talk about at some point. Or do you think that this is just the job description for the interim? And we're not going to remove any parts of it or anything like that. We should just keep it the way that it is.
I was going to ask you for some clarification here.
Can you put it up?
Yeah.
So in my mind's eye, what we're looking for is basically someone to take over the tasks that John did prior to going on administrative leave, and do them more efficiently or completely. Is that correct? I mean, we're not looking to make any substantial changes because this person is literally here for 10 to 13 months and wouldn't be here to see the changes necessarily through everything.
I agree with that at some level because we do have all of these everyday tasks that need to be done and it's a lot to get done. But I also think that there are some things that we can't stand still on. You know, we can't, like, for example, I'm pretty sure that the strategic plan is up, like it's the end of the 5 years. So you can't just not have one. Like the board and the director need to get together and make a new strategic plan. And then you need to, and the board will need to decide, how does expansion fit into that? I also think that there are some things that when we look at, and I was going to kind of cover this later, but when we look at kind of the 3 main things that we want maybe the person to work on, some of those benefits of having an interim is that they can maybe do some of those things that are harder for somebody who's going to be here for a long time, who's looking for a contract. You know, there's some compromises and consensus building that can happen with the interim. And I don't I don't want to put too much on the interim, but I don't want to not take advantage of that as well. If it's something, you know, if they have a specialty in a certain area that we need, I don't think we say, well, just ignore that specialty so you can do the day-to-day work. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is that, yes, day-to-day work. And then like, what are 3 things that they should work on? You know, obviously fall back to school planning is one of those, and that's going to take up most of the summer for them.
Mhm.
Then once school starts, are there like 2 more things that we really want them to emphasize or to work on? You know, in the board packet, I included all of the committees and task forces that the former director was on. I'm not sure that the interim needs to be on all of those task forces.
Right.
But I think that we should pick out a couple that they should, you know, maybe they need to be there because of their special knowledge, or because they're the leader of the school, there's some special things there, or because of special skills, or because of something that we need a leader to take on.
Yeah, and so that's my take too, is remember, much of what an educator does is develop themselves. That's part of our job, right? Is we teach, we prepare the lessons, we grade, we assess, but a certain percentage of our job is to develop our own self, to become a better teacher, to become a better scholar, to become knowledgeable. We are not paying the interim director to do any of those things. This is not a position that includes self-study, or we're not asking them to take any classes. We're not, you know what I mean? So much of that, you know, and they don't have a faculty development plan. They don't have a self-improvement plan. Their job is to improve MSA. And so they will come in with, as Lisa said, a skill set. We want to develop, we want to use that skill set to best help the institution, and we will not work on their weaknesses. I need my weaknesses worked on at my job. Lisa and Gina, they actually have some weaknesses too that we need to help them with, right? That's the job that will not be happening with the interim director. They will be helping all of us, the board, the teachers, the staff, with their weaknesses from their plethora of experiences to make this a better institution.
That makes sense. I was just, as I look at it, and after watching last night's board meeting, I understand expansion needs to go into the strategic plan. I don't necessarily think it needs to be the forefront thing that an interim director tackles. I don't think that's the place for an interim director, quite honestly. When there are bigger things that need to happen, such as, you know, reestablishing the community that right now feels like it's very fractured.
Yeah. And I guess, Mary, I agree with that as well. But I don't think that that means that we just stop expansion. I mean, I think that Dan and the committee can continue to go on their path. And if they need to reach out to the director for a certain direction or something like that, they certainly can do that. And I guess that's what I was thinking with like a lot of these task forces and committees, like some of them, the assistant like some of the task forces have all 3 of the directors on them. Why is that? That doesn't really make sense to me. You know, that's not using our time and our resources effectively. So that to me would be the first place where we look at those committees and say, who actually needs to be on this committee? And then if the director doesn't, then let's not have the new interim director be on that committee or task force. So that would be one. I would think that a lot of things with expansion, Dan might have a question to ask the interim about, or maybe the interim knows more about the schooling part of it, or maybe the interim has done a bunch of building programs before and they are excited about doing it. Then we shouldn't stop them from doing it, but we need to be able to say, these are the goals we need you to focus on. And I guess I agree, Mary, that expansion is not a goal that, in my mind, that the director has to focus on. But it doesn't mean we stop it either, in my mind.
No, that makes sense. My thought is it's not where the focus needs to be. That's something an assistant director can take on that committee with. I look at it as thinking, okay, The director should be on the personnel committee. He's the HR person. He or she are the HR person. That's one committee I feel very strongly that they need to be on.
Right. And we're kind of jumping around because like, I agree, like part of like these ideas of, you know, what are the goals, it kind of blends in with the job description, but I do have that on, I think next on there, right, is the additional goals and priorities. So I mean, like I said, my first question is, did you have time to look at it, or do you want to put this, I mean, we can still give the job description to the hiring task force committee and the transition and say, this is basically what we're looking for. If we didn't have time to go through it for today, which I understand because of the board meeting last night, like you wouldn't know which one we were going to use. So we can make another meeting where we can kind of come with better ideas if there are things that we want to take off of the job description or something like that.
I did not have time to look at it in between yesterday and today.
Me either.
Yeah, so can we just pull this out separately and just have you send this to us, just this one?
Yep.
And that we can take a look at. And I think if you just set up put this on a separate Google, you did send this item, JI, that is in one of my million links, right?
Right.
Somewhere.
Yep. Yep.
So do we all have access to that?
Yeah, but I don't mind just taking it out and sending it to you again. I have it out anyway. So I just wanted to send all the documents at once so you had them all in one place, wherever you had put them. So, but I can pull it out and send it to you separately.
And maybe we can just have that we don't necessarily have a meeting, but we can just comment.
Okay, sounds good.
Unless you guys think we need to have another meeting to go through it.
I think it will depend on what the comments are, but I mean, I'm not opposed to not having another meeting. I'm fine with that, so.
Well, obviously, if there gets to be a disagreement in the comments, then we need to work that out.
Right, yeah, yeah, okay.
And I definitely know I'm going to disagree with Gina right away. I mean, I can just tell. I'm not going to agree with her, so.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. So then going back to kind of the agenda then, and we've kind of already started thinking about this, is what are these additional goals and priorities? So, you know, in my mind, like I was saying before, I think we should kind of come up with 3 or 4, and it might be like, these are 4, like these are the 3 we want you to focus on, but if you really have a good skill in this one, we would be okay with that too, kind of, or allowing the person to kind of choose 3 of those 4 or something like that. Is kind of, you know, and I'm open to ideas. I was just trying to kind of think through what we'd want to kind of present to this person as far as here's your day-to-day stuff, but these are the other things that we really need you to work on. And so I know that we, at the board meeting last night, I gave you the results of the survey, and I gave this to you as well when I sent all this stuff to you. And I know the survey, only 60 people really responded to the survey. So it wasn't like a resounding, like, you know, understanding of what we should do. But I think that when we look at some of these, there are some clear things that kind of come out. I mean, obviously fall planning for returning to school, that had the most votes. So there were 60 people, and that we could, you know, vote 3 times for the different, you could have 3 different votes. So fall planning for returning to school, then implement positive school culture. That was the second one. And then the next one was remain student-centered. The 4th one was cooperative team atmosphere. Number 5 was creating an effective evaluation process and recruitment of staff with diverse backgrounds. And then I know the board talked about expansion a lot, but expansion only received 5 votes from the survey. And then but on the other side, the strategic plan only received 6 votes, but I'm pretty sure you have to do a new strategic plan this year, like the board does. So I don't know how to exactly adjust those, but I also think that I kind of went through and looked at what categories could some of these fall into. And so when you look at the category of kind of like improving the culture, improving the climate, the human resources, the evaluation, all of those things, if you kind of group them into one category of, making sure that people feel like this is a good place to work, that it's a safe place to work, all of those types of things, if you group all of those, actually 82 of the responses out of 160, I think was what out of 180, I should ask Rob to do the math, but 82 of those comments kind of fall into that category. So to me, thinking about this idea of implementing positive culture and all of these other kind of pieces that go with that, that's a big, broad category. So to me, I feel like the director, the interim, should be charged with doing something in that category. Within some of these things that are listed here, these are some examples of things that he or she could do. Having a new evaluation process. There's stuff about human resources in there. There's specific things, provide administrative structure. Like all of those things to me fit in one category, and there are examples of actions that the person could take. But I don't know.
I think all of those would be an outcome of asking the interim to do an organizational assessment when they get there. And have it be complete with staff responsibilities and duties to make sure that everybody is assigned to the correct places and, tasks that they need to be. And I think that a lot of that can fall under that organizational assessment.
And see, as a teacher, I don't know that, right? I've never done an organizational
That's
assessment.
okay. I'm sitting here.
Right.
Do we need to file paperwork for fall, for opening in the fall? That's obviously going to be a huge thing, but I don't know that as a non-teacher
Right.
either. So when I look at that, I think, okay, an organizational assessment would really take a look at who is who and what they do, and bring a lot of those issues that we're looking at into line. And it would start with that, but it should also flow into implementing a positive school culture and things like that. So I think that could be right there, could be summed up that way.
And then I don't know if the rest of you have other ideas or other ideas coming from the board that you think that we should take on.
Yeah, so my take is, it follows right along with what Mary said. So, whether you call it an organizational assessment or you talk about the fact that we need to repair the culture or the climate. Obviously, the student letter is something that person needs to read. They need to figure out why the assistant directors were surprised that the director went on administrative leave. There are clearly groups that don't understand what was going on, and so we need to find a way to figure out what there is causing that divide. And so that repair of the positive school culture through an organizational assessment is absolutely what needs to happen. And so but then they talk about tactics, right? And so you have what they call SMART goals, and then you have the tactics. Well, some of those tactics would be, so I might say that implement a positive school culture is the goal. And then what are the tactics? Well, you do an organizational assessment. You do you take a look at what was the You make sure that we remain student-centered. We talk about effective evaluation. Those are all tactics in repairing or providing or implementing a positive school climate. And so, that's how we would do it in higher education, is you have one very simple goal. Everybody knows exactly what it is. And I can't imagine there's anybody that doesn't believe that implementing a positive school culture is a bad idea. Parents understand those words, students understand those words, faculty and staff and administration. How you get to there, now that starts to get away from people. I'm not surprised that there's low numbers for expansion and low numbers for strategic planning. Most education people have no idea what those words even mean, and current parents of current students, they don't need the school to expand. Their kids are there already. The people that need the school to expand are ones that couldn't get in, that wanted to get in. They weren't voting. And the people that want the school to stay open long-term because they don't realize the screwed up financial model of charter schools. And so I wouldn't take those low numbers to mean anything, right? And in fact, when I talk to parents of alumni, so when we first got here, Jack is 21 now, so we started MSA 9 years ago. Well, the parents that were there who had some older kids were kind of on the front lines of the school, and they were already lamenting how the school was terrible, because when it was 215 students, the school was awesome. We ran things. It was innovative. Now the school is too big when it got to 312. Right? Well, now we're at 500 and our shot is 1,000. Well, that's a completely different school, right? But it's not that it's bad, it's just different, and people don't like different, especially when what was before worked for them. And so, I think that is another thing that this interim director can do, is help shift the culture from small school to, as John was saying, we're a medium school now, right? But embracing what that medium school means, because that's frankly the only way we can stay open.
And Rob, I'm going to push it a little bit further with that.
Yep.
In that you're exactly right. This is a conversation I had today, in that, when Kate started, I think the graduating class was 34. She graduated with 54. So over 7 years, we took a 20-person jump. Obviously, they can no longer go through and give shout outs to each graduate during graduation ceremonies. We saw that, I think, twice. But I don't know that our policies have necessarily kept up with our population. And so our policies were fine for that 34-person graduating class school, not necessarily there for the 54 or 56-person graduating classes. And so we need to bring some of those policies along so that we have a place for a parent to go look and say, okay, well, how did my private information get put out to a vendor? And is that a break in policy? And how do I opt out of it? And how long can they use it for? Those are some of those policies that, as we have gotten bigger, have stayed on the wayside. And I think an interim director can help us along with some of those, depending on the background that they've come from.
So Lisa, are we adding these goals to it, or are we just discussing right now?
Well, I think that we need to add the goals, because the interim, the transition and the hiring committee need to be ready to interview for those goals. So we need to be looking at the resumes and say, okay, if we want them to be someone who's going to help with this goal, do they have those expertise? Or if they don't have the expertise, does that mean that they're just like, no, we're not going to let them come in? Or, you know, we kind of have to figure some of those things out. So I think we need to figure out those goals for today so that we can at least, and maybe we can't spell out, like, you know, how Rob was saying, like, you know, here's the goal and here's all the tactics to get there. We might not be able to spell out all of those things, but at least to be able to say, these are the things that we want the interim to focus on so that people can start moving in the right direction. I think that that's what needs to be done today.
Gotcha. Okay, well then, so far, I definitely agree with the positive school culture and using the organizational assessment. And then I also agree with probably reevaluating the policies as well. Although I know those aren't a schedule, so I don't know how to word that one, but yeah. And the mindset shift.
Well, and I think part of the problem with the policies is that we just don't have an expert who does that, right? I mean, it's always just some teacher who's on the policy committee and they get them and they're like, okay, I'll change the word school district to MSA, you know, and then when you were small, you could probably do that and you kind of could just work that policy within that small school. But now that your policies actually have to like be followed to the letter of the law, because we have this larger school, we have to think about those things too. So I agree with that, but I think that's just part of why that happens.
Yeah, and just one more thing. Personally, I would love someone with HR experience. I think that would tie into a positive culture and even policies, but just thinking about like conflict resolution forms, I think that needs to be greatly improved in terms of actually resolving conflict and doing evaluations of the assistant directors, because I don't know if we actually have a procedure in place for that. So I would love someone to bring in HR experience or at least facilitate us to an HR group personally.
There is a form that was used to evaluate the assistant directors last year. At least that's what they said in personnel. So, I mean, I have the form someplace if we need the form, but.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I don't know, but I'm just saying there is a form out there to evaluate them. So, and they should be evaluated. So. All
Right, but so should we make it part of the job description to determine what, so I mean, I think part of what we ran into with 3 administrators is there wasn't defined goals because we had 3 administrators with no experience, and they were trying to learn from each other while going to school, while taking classes. And as we found out, the top administrator just didn't have that skill set to manage the others. And so maybe setting up right away, now that again, to me, falls under a tactic of the original SMART goal, which is, you know, positive school culture. But one of the things that needs to happen is, and you've mentioned it, right, some sort of evaluation of the duties, expectations, and roles of the assistant directors, and make a clear, you know, I know you used to do this, I know you used to do that, but I think it would be much more efficient to do this. And somebody with significant experience, which is hopefully what we will have with the new interim director, will be much better than we have that we had with a new director who didn't have those experiences, which clearly wasn't working out.
Well, and Rob, part of that organizational assessment would be also looking at job descriptions and looking at evaluations. Or should be, if it's done
Agreed.
correctly.
Agreed. And we already know that we have a flawed evaluation process here, because we just kept rewriting the evaluations based on the fact that, well, that didn't work, so now let's add it to the evaluation. And that didn't work, and now let's add it to the evaluation. And that's flawed, right? I mean, we need clear direction on these are the expectations, and if you didn't meet it, here's your improvement plan. And if you don't meet it, now we'll find somebody that can, as opposed to all of this continual, well, you didn't do that. Well, you didn't tell me I had to do that. Well, a natural leader would know that. Okay, so let's start over. And so those are the things. We just have to recreate that, because I'm not convinced that the leadership that we have can't do the job. We don't know based on what we've been given so far.
All right, so then I feel like, Jennifer, I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to add, or
Well, the only thing I was thinking of is how do we incorporate the remain student-centered part of that? I mean, I don't know. That's a tough one.
well, so
Yeah.
my question, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Well, my question with that is, are we not student-centered? Are we moving away from being student-centered right now? Like, I don't see that as an issue. Like, yes, we should do that. We should remain that way, but I don't see it as an issue that we're not doing that. So if we aren't doing it, then yes, we need to bring it back and make that part of the focus and make sure that that's happening. But in my experience, I don't see that as that we're moving the other way. But I also think that having a positive culture will help everybody. And like thinking about the letter to the board yesterday, having a positive culture in those other areas as well, that's going to spill over to being student-centered as well. Although obviously the word spilling over to being student-centered doesn't really, that's not being student-centered, I guess, but still, you know, that's going to have some impact on that, I guess.
I was going to ask, thank you, Lisa, because I wanted to know what the four of you would define as being student-centered, because we're a school. I would think we would be student-centered, or is it, I guess I'm looking for definition. Is that more student engagement with the leadership? We've had that in the past with directors where they held before school clubs and groups. And so I guess I'm just asking for some clarification, especially as we look at it on a hiring task force.
I guess to me, it's kind of a loose idea, but thinking about how we have clubs and activities to help foster student interest. Our curriculum is tied around students, obviously. Thinking about policies, basically all the decisions the school makes to me is student-centered, but I don't really know how to clearly define it. In my mind, I get it, but I don't know how to clearly write that down.
I guess I would say if there's a day that I get to come in and just teach and not worry about all of these other things, that would be a student-centered day for me.
Yes.
But that's been a while now since that's happened. So. I don't know, parents probably have a different way of looking at it than us, maybe.
Well, I was just wondering if people are thinking that the interim is going to be at games. Are they going to be at conferences? Do they think they're going to interact with the interim more? I'm not sure.
To me, no. The interim's
Right.
job is not to get to know the students because they're only going to be here a year. Now,
Yeah.
they should hear the students. They should read those letters. They should talk to the student leaders. They should hear from the clubs. They should hear from the parents, the coaches, all those kinds of things. But to me, the interim is not to get to know the students. Now, they need to get to know the culture that the students expect, some of those kinds of things, right? But for them to try to learn the names of 500 students, I think is not a good use of their time. They should be trying to help the teachers and the staff and the coaches and the board figure out how do you, from your experience, make this a place where students want to be?
And was this survey for the interim? I can't remember if it was just, okay, what do you want in an interim? Okay.
Yep. And we'll do another one next year for the permanent
Okay.
director. So, right.
And I agree, Rob. That's what I didn't think, that the interim was going to get that involved with the kids. I agree. And I think fixing some things, like Lisa said, I think would go a long way. So.
Yeah, that's good.
I was gonna say, I know 5 years ago, it was if the students wanted a club, talk to a teacher and see if they would sponsor it or be the advisor for it. And the students brought forth all sorts of different clubs. And I thought, boy, if we've gone away from that, we've got some problems. But I can fully understand and support what Lisa is saying as far as teachers are trained and want to teach and not deal with the bureaucracy of running the school. And so I think that, if we have a task-oriented director, that might help that happen from a teacher's perspective. I do think there's something to having a director, whether it's interim or permanent, be somewhat visible. We don't want them just hiding away in their office. But we want them getting their jobs done so that the teachers don't have to do their job.
All right. So does it feel like we have kind of 3 goals then? So Gina, what do you have in the notes as what are you thinking the 3 goals are?
Yeah. So one goal is to implementing a positive school culture or facilitating a positive school culture is one. And then I also have a second one as, sorry, just looking. The positive school culture would include doing the organizational assessment, which would also encompass reviewing the evaluation system. So it kind of is all in there. And then I have currently also the mindset from small school to big school, evaluation of policies, and those are it. So again, positive school culture, mindset shift, and policy reevaluation. Those are like the big 3 that I have currently identified from our conversation. And the student-centered would still be in that positive school culture goal.
What about fall planning, or is that part of?
Oh, that I didn't have.
To me, that's a no-brainer.
That's
obviously,
just part of the
that
job.
is just part of any job, right? You don't hire a teacher and say, you have to go to class. Right? I mean, that's just not part of your goals, right? You
Okay.
do that.
All right.
Right?
I hope so.
That's my opinion, right? We shouldn't have to tell them. Now, again, they also aren't doing the fall planning. That's the job of Gravine and the assistant, right? But they have to manage that. They have to, right? They have to make sure Joelle is supported. They have to make sure Emily is supported, right? The SPED folks, right? That's a process that hasn't always gone smoothly, and that's something that they can come in and help, right?
I don't think the counselors do it at all. Like they like do like kids sign up for their classes like through the counselors and stuff like that, but the counselors mostly don't work in the summertime, so they're not doing too much of the fall planning. So I mean, and if we're going to have the assistant directors do it, then I think that they need to be told that they're going to have to do it. I'm not sure that that's part of the problem, is that the 3 of them work together, and who could ever tell which person did which thing, right? Now, ultimately, it's the responsibility of one person to get all of those things done. So I agree that we shouldn't have to tell the interim that they have to do fall planning. It should be obvious. But we also need to think about, as far as the time goes, they're going to probably spend most of the summer doing the fall planning. So whatever goals we give them, like thinking about the organizational assessment, if we think about the timeline, they're not probably going to be working on the organizational assessment this summer because they're going to be doing all the stuff for the fall planning. So we just, thinking about the timing of it too. Of course, they can kind of work those things out themselves as well. It's not, we don't have to say it's done by November or something, but
I don't know. I'm thinking that, is it important that they do the fall plan, or because they're coming in not knowing our school? And realistically, they're going to start July 1. If a final interviews are on June 10th, by the time you do a background check, after the board decides which candidate they want to hire, and a contract is extended and everything else, you're looking at minimum July 1st before that candidate starts. And quite honestly, to have us start school at the end of August, which I believe is the start date this year again, we're already behind the gun at that point. I think we need to make sure that the assistant directors know that they're doing the fall plan for returning to school, that it's not going to fall on the interim director, because one, those assistant directors know our students and our staff the best, and they're not having to learn anything about our students and staff, whereas an interim coming in is going to need to learn different things about that. They can maybe sign off on the final plan, but if we're going to wait until July 1st and then they have to get onboarded and get keys and computer access and everything else, we're going to be really far behind the gun. Just my 2 cents.
That makes sense. And to be clear, I have as the job description, it would include fall planning, Lisa, and the other goals were additional goals. So am I wrong in the notes?
No, I think the job description includes fall planning. At least that was my perception coming into the meeting. And then the other things were the additional goals.
Okay, but I get what Mary is saying.
Right. Yeah.
Keep it on there just so that the person is aware that we need to keep that momentum going once they do come on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I assume that we can make that decision, or is that a board decision that needs to be made, that the assistant directors need to be told that it's up to them to do those things? I mean, I know obviously Joelle does all the schedule. She already has the schedule all planned. She has kids already placed every place. So that part is already done, unless the assistant directors add other people or do something different. But I mean, that part is done, but there's other things that go along with the fall planning. So I'm not sure if the interim directors right now are planning to do that, or, I mean, obviously they've taken on summer school as well. So.
I mean, the interim director has to come in and instantly figure out where we are and what they can help with, right? I mean, I would think, right, most professional folks would not come in and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. The first several weeks, like Mary said, is they're just going to have to figure out how the school works, right? And then when they see inefficiencies or they see priorities not being met, that's when they start to use their expertise.
Right.
And I think some of that learning this school is going to fall into that organizational assessment too.
Yep.
As they learn it.
And what Jeff's team does to orient them, right? I mean, that's going to be an important part of what Jeff and his group does.
All right. So are we comfortable then going, we have fall planning in their, what did you say? Where did you say you had it in their job description, right, Gina?
I mean, that's what I heard us talking about. I have not affected the job description as we went, by the way. I haven't
Okay.
touched that. I just have it under number 5. And then
Okay.
number 6, I had the 3 additional goals.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So that kind of makes sense to me as well. Does that work for everybody? So number 5, job description, we'll add fall planning. And like the 3 of them will have to kind of work it out. And of course, the transition or the onboarding group will have to kind of work with them on that as well. And then the additional goals or priorities, those were the ones that Gina just wrote about. So do we feel comfortable telling those 3 goals kind of to the 2 different committees or task forces so that they can kind of start collecting data or start looking at interview questions? And as they're reading the resumes, they can look for those specific skill sets as well. Good.
I'm good.
All right, good. All right. Then if we're moving on to number 7, the pay and the package, I'm not quite as concerned as about that, just because it seems like right now the 3 or the applicants that we have, none of them have indicated that they have any special thing, you know, that they wouldn't want to work full time or something like that. But to me, it would be after the hiring committee interviews them, and then before the board interview, we would have some sort of discussion about that. So, I mean, I don't know if we need to start putting like those plans together right now as far as what might be different. I mean, I did have one applicant who looked amazing, but he has a permanent date with a Florida beach from Christmas until spring break. So to me, that was just, I felt like uncomfortable. I wouldn't want to put the school in a situation of not have, like, what permanent director is going to leave wherever they're at and come here in the middle of the year in December? You know, this guy is a professional interim though. He does it basically, you know, in the fall, and then he does it in the spring. So, you know, it's kind of like that would be a good skill set for us to have, but I felt like that put the school at risk. So he just begged off. He's like, I'm not going to apply for it. So, but otherwise everyone else, I mean, I put it as a full-time job. No one has like said, well, is it really a full-time job or anything like that? So can we put off talking about the pay and the packages since it's 5:30? Is that okay? Okay. And then I just want you to think about, we're going to have to figure out what the job description for the permanent director is. I don't know if we want to use the old one, the new one, or if we want to revisit it or something, but at some point in the future, some task force, whether it's us or we bring back the personnel task force or whatever, somebody's going to have to look at that and make some decisions. Obviously, that's a thing we can kind of do next fall, but I just want us to be thinking about that as well. I don't know. Was there anything else that you had or any other concerns or any questions that you had for me?
Can you refresh my memory, Lisa? Do we know a ballpark of what the pay package is roughly,
Yes.
or a range? Do we have
Yeah.
that?
So I think in the budget, it was about 100,000 and then plus their benefits.
Yep, that's what I recall as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know if we would ever, I mean, now that I've said it in public, I'm not sure that it matters, but if there was somebody who had fewer skills, would we like go below that? I don't know if that's something, or if it's just like, hey, this is what we're giving you. You know, if we're hiring you, we think that you're good enough and this is what our offer is. So, but we can also talk about that a little bit later too. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's always negotiations, right? So that's what the school would have to deal with.
Right. Yep. All right. So I would like to schedule another meeting just because if we have some of these other things to look at, I think it would be good for us. And just in case something else comes up, if we don't need to have the other meeting, then we'll cancel it. But, you know, thinking about the job description, if we need to come back and talk about that, I'd like to schedule a meeting just so that we have one on the books. We can always cancel it. Is that okay with everybody?
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. Oops. So I don't know, Mary, do you feel like there's anything that you need from this committee before your committee can keep moving forward? Is there other information that you need? Like your timeline will have changed a little bit, but I think I emailed you about that a little
Right.
bit last
Right.
night.
our timeline will change a little bit. I think identifying those 3 tasks was huge for us, because now we can start looking at the questions and tailoring those around
Mhm.
these other goals. So I thank you for that.
Yep.
I'm glad to hear that we're off of the 2 resumes, that we have a few more applicants. So I think at this point, we are good for what I need for my group.
All right, can we just schedule one for June 1st? That's a Tuesday at 4:30 again. So that's 2 weeks from now. And then that would be about a little bit more than a week before the board interview. So then if there were any last minute things we had to deal with, hopefully we would be able to do that. Does that work for everyone?
So June 1st at 4:30?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe I can do that.
Works for me.
Okay.
It works.
All right, sounds awesome. All right. Well, as always, if you ever have any questions, just reach out. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming and sharing your time and answering all my questions. I appreciate your help.
Oh, Lisa, one question. Will that be Zoom?
Yes, because it is still before the end of the safe school learning plan, or just whatever the name of the plan is. So yeah, because that plan doesn't end until June 7th.
Right.
What day of the week is June 7th? I don't have a calendar.
Monday.
right in front of me. Monday?
No, it's Tuesday.
No, June 7th is a Monday.
Oh, the 7th. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Mhm. Oh, the meeting. Yeah,
So-
June 1st is a Tuesday.
Okay.
So my question is, if the hiring committee were to, and the rest of you, if you want to drop off, this is probably a question for Lisa.
Sure, that's fine. Yeah. Okay.
So for the hiring committee, we had originally gone with the earlier timeline.
Yeah.
But if we were to hold and not do interviews until June 7th, that Monday, and do 7th and 8th maybe,
Yeah.
we could do them in person, right?
Well, technically June 7th is at midnight is the end of that safe learning plan. But I also think that you can do them in person in a large room, right? The thing is then you still have to wear a mask. That would be the only thing, is that you have to wear a mask. So, but also you might be able to fix it that if you're only interviewing 4 people, if you really want to do it in person without a mask, maybe you can do all 4 of them on Tuesday. Or it sort of depends, or, maybe you have some that you're really excited about and you make sure those ones you do on one of the days, and the ones that you're like, well, maybe, or, there's dissension within the committee, maybe you do those ones on one of the other days to prove, I don't know, whatever you might want to do. So, you could always do it on Wednesday too, but it just seems like if the
Boy, that's a
board,
quick turnaround.
yeah, that's a quick turnaround, right? So, because you'd have to call them and say, hey, you got to come here. So,
Right. Thank you. That was the question I had.
okay, sounds good.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Mary.
Good day.
All right, goodbye, you guys. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead